So today we're going to be talking about the new year going ahead, and it's an opportunity to hit the reset button. So as I'm writing this and we're talking about setting a reset button, what is it that you would like to get out of this session? I know that I sent a couple of questions out and a few people were kind enough to respond, but if you're feeling comfortable just to write a few things in the chat box, I would love that so we can really begin to tailor what it is that you're after. So when we talk about a mindful, focused and productive year ahead, what does that mean to you? What do you want that to look like for you? Because for everybody, it'll mean something different. Thank you. Or it might mean being more positive, or it might mean bringing in more acceptance to the situation, or it might mean being more focused and productive, but it means different things to different people. So as I'm talking, write in the chat box what you hope to achieve for this year and how you think this session might be able to support you. So mindfulness is about bringing in focus and awareness and managing your stress and overwhelm. It's not about eliminating stress and overwhelm, because there's part of that's part of life, but it's about being able to manage it with your thoughts, actions and behaviors. Mindfulness is about being present in the current moment. So you'll get natural moments of mindfulness when you're doing something that you love. For example, if you love gardening, you'll find that you naturally become mindful, being present in the moment. Nothing else matters. It's just about your hands in the earth, being really grounded and present with that. And your thoughts, actions and behaviors are following through with your gardening, the smelling of the roses, being really present, and not thinking about necessarily the past or the future, but you're really in that moment. And I know it sounds quite simple. It's like, yeah, sure, being present in the moment. But it's actually a very challenging thing to do, especially when we are having challenging moments in our lives. And so this is why we're spending some time talking about how do we elevate that. There's a statistic showing how often we are present in the moment. And that statistic, unfortunately, is 47% of the time we are not present in the moment. And that's half of the time we are not present in the moment. Now, the reason why that's important is because not being present equates to being happy or not being happy. The study showed that by being present, it didn't matter what you were doing, but if you were present, you were happier. And so that was an interesting study to come out of that. So mindfulness is about being present and learning to do that more and more, especially when your thoughts get taken away with, there might be things, quite heavy information coming, or, you might feel overwhelming sadness or whatever emotion is going on. And so what that means is being present in the moment, and we'll train that. And the reason I talk about training, because that's what it actually is. So science shows that the more we train our mind to do a certain thing, neuroplasticity comes into play. And neuroplasticity is basically neurons that wire together. And so when you are training or practicing something over and over again, then your brain, your neurons become stronger and stronger and stronger. So it is like training your bicep muscle into being more present in the moment, and remembering that more present in the moment means happier. And it's not about it's about that contentness. It's about bringing in that feeling of this is a good place to be for the moment, not thinking about the past or the present. Now, I did ask what would you like to get out of today, and we might just go through that chat box just to see what has come out of that. So what would you like the year to be like going ahead? What does it mean to be more mindful and productive and present for the year? And what would you like to get out of today's session?
So Sabina, I'll just read out, Jennifer's put more energy, focus and enjoyment. And Colin's added creating and completing projects.
Fantastic. And when you talk about completing projects, and this goes for everybody, because I know that Colin is not, everybody's probably feeling this, is what do we want, some technology assistance, or do we want to create some habits, some habits to create that? What kind of direction do you want to go with that? And this is for everyone to type in the chat box, creating, consistency to complete things. What is it that you think that would be really helpful?
And also just adding on, Sabina, living in the moment I've got, and present for the year, today, learning something new. So with all my goals, more focus on consistency, remeditation. So again, focusing on the projects and creating and discovering new.
Yeah, fantastic. So when we talk about consistency of projects, I want to talk a little bit about neuroplasticity, because that's what we started with mindfulness. And if we train our minds to continually get distracted, which, if I'm guessing some people in this room remember a time that we didn't even have phones, and we didn't have any electronic devices next to us all the time. And if you haven't experienced that, imagine what that would look like and feel like. We had an environment that wasn't continually bombarding us with distractions. And then we could choose what we would focus on. If we grew up as a child without it, we would find things to do. We would play in the backyard or so forth, and we would entertain ourselves, but we wouldn't be distracted by creating 3-second videos or so forth. By continuing on with the 3-second videos, we're training our mind to stay focused on something for 3 seconds. So when we talk about neuroplasticity and projects and habits, it's actually a quite important component to look at how have you been training your mind up until now. What I don't want you to do is give yourself a hard time, because I am in exactly the same boat. We are all in the same boat. If I ask myself, what am I training myself in? I'd be like, oh, I've got pop-ups. Oh, I've got my phone on all the time. So there's calls always coming in. So I'm constantly distracted by stimuli. And that stimuli isn't necessarily helpful for the project that I need to do. So what I would like to start with when we talk about projects is what do you think you could begin to eliminate to help you focus better, to help your brain create neurons that are going to support you to focus for a longer period of time, for a more dedicated period of time? It requires that training. But we need to remove the stimuli that's not serving us. So in the chat box, have a think about what stimuli and how you will begin to remove that distraction. Because if we want to be able to stay focused on the task and complete it, then it's going to take that repetition. So in the chat box, if you use some apps or technology to be able to support you to stay focused and not distracted and complete the project, I really want to hear about that. If you're thinking about wanting to remove some distractions, I want to hear about that. So for me, it would be removing pop-ups from my computer. It would be putting my phone on airplane mode more often, so I'm not getting those distractions. I might decide to do the Pomodoro technique, which is about, you can, if someone can just pop that in the chat box, you can do some research on that technique, but it's about allocating a certain amount of time for you just to work on the project, then have some rest time, and then being able to work on that project again. But working in with your body and mind, depending on what you think is manageable. Not about what you think is perfect or what you want to do to get there, but what do you think is manageable for you? So has anybody written anything in the chat box in regards to technology or ways that they work on projects and keeping that consistency?
Yep, Sandy's just put switch notifications off on the phone. And
Yep.
Annie's got her hand raised. Annie, do you want to unmute yourself?
I'm having difficulty with the chat box. The chat box has just disappeared. In fact, I haven't been able to access the chat box at all. So my apologies if I'm not responding.
Well, that's okay, Annie. But if there's something you want to share or respond to Sabina, just raise your hand and you can just talk.
Will do. Yeah, thank you very much.
Lovely to hear your voice. It's lovely to hear your voice, Annie. So anything that you want to say in that would be great.
Lovely.
Thank you. Great. And that goes for anybody as well. Making it as interactive as possible. I know it's online. Sometimes it's hard to be interactive. It's much better when we're in person, but this is the world we're living in at the moment. But I'm glad that you're all coming to interact and supporting this session. Okay, let's move on.
Sorry, I'll just read just a few more, Sabina, before we move on.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Using phone timer to do projects, managing tiredness and choosing the best time for energy levels. I keep myself accountable by telling people when I am taking a chunk of time to work, and I have an app to daily monitor my weight, so that keeps me on track. And then definitely spend less time on technology, time limits for that. So
fantastic. Do you know, there was a couple of things that I really loved in there. I loved all of them, but I just want to pick up on a couple of points. And that was someone that mentioned about sharing with people around them, so that way they're accountable and they've carved out some time and the boundaries around that. I would like to know a little bit more around that, because creating boundaries not only helps others, but it certainly helps ourselves be accountable and going, right, this is the time that we have. We're allocating half an hour, no interruptions during that time, and then everybody else is aware of that process as well. My question is, what stops us from doing that? We often say to ourselves, we'd like to do that. We'd like to set up boundaries and we'd like to just have half an hour. We can just focus on that. We can get it out of the way. But what is it that, let's have a look and explore what gets in the way of actually actioning it, if anything. And if nothing comes up, I've got plenty that I can share. Okay, I'll share one. Often there'll be like we come into the office or we're at home and the kids are, wanting certain attention, and we feel guilty. We feel guilty, like we should be on all the time and not prioritizing ourselves. And so in this session, I really want to give gratitude to you being present and giving this to yourselves, because this is about honoring yourselves and creating that time. But I'd like you to continue that for the year, to be able to make a very conscious effort to go, these are my boundaries. This is the time that I need. But it's also, these are the boundaries and these are the emotions, these are the feelings, so really being clear about what it is that you need in this moment. Mindfulness is about being present, yes, but it's also about taking action on what is happening. So if you are noticing that you're feeling stressed and overwhelmed, you might say, I need 10 minutes to go and do a meditation, or to breathe, or to take some time out. And that's being very clear about it. But what tends to stop us from doing that is guilt, not being aware, feeling like you should be doing something else, and not giving ourselves the time that we need. Has anything else popped up in the chat box as I'm talking?
Yep. So some of the things that have been let go, I've got old habits and routine. I have to change my environment and move away from others. Putting others first, so letting go of that. Tiredness,
Yes.
Need to be available as a carer.
Yes, absolutely. If you can relate to some of those, just do a nod so other people in the room can see that we are all experiencing those, you know, so feeling like you always need to be switched on, being available for others, always caring for others, but not providing that care for yourself first. It's that simple analogy of if the plane is crashing, the mask, the oxygen mask needs to be placed on yourself before it's placed on others. And I know that we know that. We know that. But really looking at how do you think you're going to put that forward for the year? So if you've got a pen and paper next to you, write some notes down. Perhaps you've got your phone next to you and you want to write some notes in your phone. Please do, because as we go along, these actions, I don't want these actions that you come up with and these ideas that have, you know, perhaps you've come up with some ideas in the session and gone, that's a great idea, I should do that. And then by the end of the session, you know, you'll go, I forget about it, or don't put it into action. So it really needs to have that priority going forward. So if you've got something to write it down or a great memory, then fantastic. All right. Meditation and mindfulness, what is the difference? Sometimes they're used interchangeably. So we just want to say that mindfulness is a method of training your attention so that you can bring it where you want and keep it where you want. So mindfulness, as I said, maybe it's gardening, or mindfulness is walking. If you're able to just mindfully walk, not engaged in your head so much, you'll be, it's a certain percentage that you're present and thinking, but you're more present and focused in your body when you are mindful. So there's a difference in just the percentage of how often you are present in your body, and that means that you're being more mindful. So if you're engaging in your senses while you're walking, feeling your feet on the ground, smelling the roses, observing, listening to the birds, that's being really mindful. And so you'll know when you're being mindful and when you're not. Now, when something's pleasing, it's a lot easier to be mindful. What happens when we're uncomfortable? What happens when we want to avoid something or escape from something, or it's challenging? That's a lot more difficult to be mindful and present in the moment. And so what we want to also address in this session is, how do we be more mindful when it's the last thing we want to do? We actually don't want to be mindful. We just want to escape. The way that we're feeling is overwhelming, and it's just the last thing we want to be thinking about. How do you be more mindful? Because mindfulness is about being more present, and it means that you're happier. But as far away as, you know, being happy at the moment. So how do we work with that? So that's just something I wanted to touch on. So if you have some thoughts, please start writing them in the chat box. If you want to say something verbally, please feel free to just jump in. You don't need to wait. And then I'll just go back to the chat box in a minute. All right. And meditation is any technique that allows you to relax the body and calm the mind. So some of you would have experienced meditation perhaps at the end of a yoga session, or meditation at you close your eyes, you lie on the ground, or maybe you sit cross-legged, or maybe some of you have been to a meditation retreat. So meditation is more around that formal process. It's the intention of stilling the mind and the body, and mindfulness is about that action. So you're being mindful in the action, but you're still connected. So the qualities are actually quite similar. You're engaging your senses in your body, and your mind is not excessively thinking. It is the percentage of it is much lower. So if you're engaged in something that's uncomfortable, it's okay to think, yes, that's uncomfortable, but if it spirals out of control, that's not being mindful. So if you're being mindful in your body and going, yep, that feels uncomfortable, and it's more felt with your body, or it's not running away from it, it's being present in the moment. Does anyone have any questions on that? Because I know that sometimes questions come up around there.
Yeah, so just Gillian's shared that when she's overwhelmed, she goes to a quiet place and asks herself what's going on, or get away from from that feeling to go to the happy place. Sandy's put, I feel adrenaline keeps me in the moment as I feel a responsibility as a carer.
Yeah. Fantastic. So going to that quiet place, creating an environment. So on your paper, just writing down, what environment are you going to create to be more mindful? And if it's your responsibility as a carer, how do you create moments of stillness within that? So you can't change the external environment. That's not always possible. But how do you change the internal environment? How do you create that space to be a bit more still, to be a bit more mindful? So this is an example of mindful eating. Now, there won't be any sound, but you'll get the gist of this one. Now, simple task, mindfully eating. She thoroughly enjoyed her soup. She was in the present moment, and she showed it with her body. So when we're eating, are you mindfully eating? Now, I don't expect you all to be as expressive as this beautiful little girl, but when we're mindfully eating, are we using that opportunity to be present in the moment? Remembering being present in the moment equates to being happier. So when you're being the carer, are you using that opportunity of eating to be doing that mindfully? So sometimes we just don't have that extra time to be creating a formal meditation or extra time for mindfulness activities, but we can integrate them into activities we're already doing. Can we be more mindful while we're eating? And every time this one comes up, I eat my food at my desk, or when we've got food on the table, we're putting the TV on and there's a lot of white noise. Can anybody relate to that? If there's anything different that I haven't said, pop it in the chat box as well.